everyone, and welcome. This is the CFIB and CRA webinar on the 75% wage subsidy. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Alexa Milne, and I'm with CFIB. We are very happy to present to you today our webinar in partnership with the CRA on the 75% wage subsidy. We do want you to know that all questions asked today will be shared with the CRA to help them better formulate their FAQ section of their subsidy page. Just the sheer volume of people online is posing some challenges. However, we are doing our best to get you the information that you need. I will now hand our webinar over to Corinne Pullman, Senior Vice President, National Affairs and Partnerships at CFIB.
Thank you, Alexa, and welcome to our webinar. We're very pleased to have CRA join us here today to talk about the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. Applications, of course, are going to be open as of Monday, so it's a great opportunity for you to get some questions in and get some answers. So I'm going to introduce you to the team. I will point out and just repeat what Alexa said. There is handouts on the side, and making sure that if you have questions that you certainly bring them in, and we will get to questions fairly soon. But first, let's introduce some of the team that's here from CRA today. We have Faisal Ghulam Hussain, who is the Director of Policy for the Office of the Minister of CRA, and he's going to do some introductory remarks. And then we're going to have the following folks you see on your screen: Karen Butcher, who's the Director General, Business Returns Directorate; Harry Gill, the Director General for Small and Medium Business Enterprises; Randy Hewlett, the Director General for Legislative Policy Directorate; and then Mike Joy, Director of Business Projects; and Guyer Graves, the Assistant Manager for GST HST Rebates Processing. So they are all on the call today. So we have lots of folks from CRA who can help hopefully answer some of your questions and provide you a bit of insight into how this is all going to work. I think at this point, what I will do is I will hand it over to Faisal to say a few words, and then we'll move into the presentation. Over to you, Faisal. Oh, is maybe Faisal not there? Are you on mute, Faisal? Okay, so I think perhaps Faisal is not with us today. So perhaps what we'll do is we'll turn it right over to, is it Harry or Randy that will start the presentation?
Corinne, it's Karen speaking. I'll just say a couple of words to get us started.
Sure.
As you noticed, thanks. As you mentioned, the application process will open on April 27th, and applications can be made through the CRA's My Business account or Represent a Client portals. Employers are encouraged to sign up for one of these services if they don't already have access to them. For employers that are not signed up, they will be able to submit their application using a web form. And this is the same process used to submit information returns to the CRA. To help employers get ready to apply, we've launched a Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy webpage and calculator. The webpage includes information about who is eligible, how to apply, and how the subsidy is calculated. The page includes a calculator that guides employers through a step-by-step process and enables employers to determine the subsidy amount that they can expect to claim based on the information they enter into the calculator fields. We recognize the important role that stakeholders are playing in providing feedback to the CRA on how we administer the wage subsidy, and we're really pleased that the CFIB took the time to participate in user testing for the calculator and this online tool, and have helped influence the design. When you apply for the wage subsidy as of April 27th, you'll be asked to enter amounts into the application form, such as the number of eligible employees and gross payroll. The calculator enables you to prepare now by helping you determine the specific line amounts that you will need to enter into the application form. The calculator also has a printable statement feature that you can use to view your claim at a glance. And as of April 27th, you can use the statement to enter the required information into the application form quickly. And it should only take you no more than 5 minutes to complete the application form. We will be collecting applications throughout the week of April 27th and analyzing and calibrating our system checks. so that we can use an automated verification process for the large majority of these claims. On May 4th, the automated verification process will start. So any applications received that week will be processed at the same time. This means you don't need to rush to apply on April 27th. You can do so anytime next week, as the first batch will all be processed together. Once the automated verification processing is completed, we will begin the process of issuing payments starting May 5th for the approved applications. It's important to note that some of the applications will go through an additional manual verification process, and we expect the additional verification can be done in a few days for all but the most difficult applications, but businesses may be contacted by phone to help with this verification process. So please do not think that the phone call is a scam, and realize that it is legitimately linked to your application. We expect a very high percentage of the payments to be issued in that first week. And if you're not registered for direct deposit on your payroll account, you should allow for additional time for your check to be delivered in the mail, again, to the address that's on your payroll account with the CRA. I encourage everyone to visit the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy webpage for more information, as this site will be updated regularly over the next days and weeks. And just to finish off, we have already opened a call center site that is manned with agents who can respond to questions specifically for the wage subsidy. And with those opening remarks, I'll turn it over to Harry.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. So I am the Director General of the Small and Medium Enterprises, Director of the Compliance Programs branch. So essentially, compliance programs, the audit branch. So we do the income tax and GST audits for the most part for the agency. And just wanted to provide a few more details beyond what Karen said about the whole compliance angle. This is obviously a very large program, unprecedented really. We're talking $70 billion plus, so it's obviously very important for the government that we make sure that the program is delivered with integrity, and that the tax base is protected. We've heard the messages from the Prime Minister about, counting on Canadian businesses to represent their circumstances honestly and not to abuse the system. So, we know that many Canadian businesses are under extreme pressure as a result of the circumstances brought about by COVID-19. As such, we want our approach to compliance to be a balance. So we need the balance to get the flow of funds quickly. So as Karen kind of talked about, computerized validation checks on the front end and trying to move claims through the best we can. Some pulled aside for a bit of manual verification. And there will also be a post-verification or post-audit program as well. So just like any program in the CRA where returns get assessed, money gets paid out, whatever the case may be, but we may come after the fact and do audits, that will be the case with this program as well. And it'll start probably in June, July. So if you're filing in April, May, phone calls could start to come out for that sort of more traditional in-depth audit, a bit, maybe in 6-8 weeks kind of thing. We want to assure that the businesses that are severely affected by the crisis who make best efforts to demonstrate that they meet the eligibility requirements, like you should expect that the CRA will accept your applications and your representations. The objective of the program is to help businesses who've lost revenue to meet their normal payroll. On the other hand, it really is the businesses who seek to flout the rules or engage in aggressive tax planning, or who are basically just exploiting the subsidy program. They can expect the CRA to apply a full range of compliance measures. I'd just like to reiterate something else Karen said, which is about the stakeholder engagement and CFIB. They've been very engaged with us, providing us with questions, providing us with these types of opportunities. Very much appreciate that. I'll stop there. So in the Q's and A's, people might have more questions about the sort of compliance approach, and I'd be happy to take those questions after. But for that, I'll stop at this moment, because I know you guys want to get into more of the technical pieces of the program, and I think Randy's next.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Or are we walking through the infographics?
Hi, Harry. It's Randy here. I'll just say a few quick words. Hope everyone can hear me. So my name is Randy Hewlett. I'm the Director General of the Legislative Policy Director with the CRA. So we are the technical branch of the CRA, and we're responsible for a liaison with the Department of Finance, and much of the information you will see online for the CRA that has a technical spin to it, we're generally involved in that. So yesterday evening, we went live with a series of frequently asked questions on the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. Those are currently online, as I mentioned, and they discuss in detail many aspects of the legislation and the benefit that most businesses will want to have a bit more detailed information on. So it provides an overview. It talks about eligibility for employers and what are eligible employees. Talks about qualifying revenue, how to calculate that revenue. It provides more detailed information on calculating the wage subsidy and how you go about claiming the wage subsidy, and also how the agency will ensure compliance. I generally don't have a lot more to say than that. I'd rather leave more time for questions. So I believe the next step we'll go through the deck briefly, and then we'll get to the question and answers. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Who's going to be leading us through the deck?
I think so. Okay, it's Harry here. I think I will. Is it it's the infographics, right, that we are going to go through? So I can do that. That's a slide that's up now. So on the left-hand side of the slide, the infographic, and these infographics can be found on the CRA website as well. Are you eligible for the, are you eligible for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy? So what is it? It's a subsidy of up to 75%, up to a maximum of $847 per employee per week, for up to 12 weeks, so to get their wages subsidized. Who's eligible? So there's many types of businesses that are eligible: individuals, taxable corporations, registered charities, nonprofit organizations, and partnerships consisting of eligible employers. There's more details again on the website. So within the nonprofit, again, what all is included in there, boards of trade and different types of entities. You'll find all that information on our website in the Q's and A's. So before you apply, what you need to know, what is your eligible revenue reduction. So that's the notion of the 15% drop or the 30% drop revenue that you have to have kind of as a base criteria to enter into the program. So it's really for businesses. Essentially, the theory behind it being that your sales have gone down because of the emergency, and the government's going to provide this wage subsidy so you can keep people employed and keep those relationships with your employees. So for the first period, March 15 to April 11, a 15% drop in revenue is what you would need to demonstrate, and that can be done by comparing your March 2020 sales to your March 2019 sales. Or it can be done by comparing your March 2020 sales to the average of your sales from January and February. Now, an important thing to note is if you qualify for that 15% drop, if you're applying for the first period, then you're deemed to have qualified for the second period. So your second period drop could be less than the 30%. But then when you get to the third period, you've got to show that for that third period that you've dropped the 30%. And then maybe in the Q's and A's, we can get a little bit more into the detail because people might have questions about that specifically, but that's a general principle that you need to know. Who are the eligible employees that you can claim this for? They're employees that are employed by you in Canada, and employees that have received eligible remuneration for 14 or more consecutive days in the eligibility period. So if you're going to be claiming, let's say on Monday or next week for the March 15 to April 11 period, employees employed in Canada by you, and that you paid for at least 14 days during that period. Whatever wages you've paid them, you can claim the subsidy for. And what is eligible remuneration? So it's amounts that you pay the employee, typically salary, wages, and other taxable benefits, fees, and commissions. It does not include items such as stock benefits, stock option benefits, or benefits related to the use of a corporate vehicle, for example. And again, more information in the Q's and A's and on the website about that. The second infographic, how is the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy calculated? So first, you're going to select your claim period, one of those 3 periods that are listed there. You're going to determine your gross payroll for eligible employees. So again, the government's providing a subsidy of up to 75% per employee, up to $847 per employee per week. So there's different scenarios, and this is where the calculator is going to come very, very much in handy. I've personally gone on and run a bunch of scenarios through the calculator just for myself so I could understand the different scenarios well, and it's user friendly. If you try to read the legislation or you just try to read the way it's verbally written out on the web pages, I find that it's harder. But essentially, like, your scenarios are going to be, to summarize them high level, if you have an employee that earned more than $1129.33 in the baseline period, so from January to March 15, if their average per week was above $1129, and why $1129? Because 75% of $1129 is $847. So if you had someone that made more than $1129 and they keep making more than $1129 after during the first eligible period, there's a calculation around that. Or you're going to have people that earned less than $1129, but then their pay stayed the same. You're going to have people who earned less than $1129 and their pay actually went down. So again, the calculator will take you through all these scenarios and kind of spit out a number for you at the end to say, this is what your claim would be. You can enter it employee by employee. And then there's another set of rules for arm's length and non-arm's length for people that are operating with like a closely held corporation, let's say, where it's a non-arm's length situation. Again, the calculator accounts for that situation. So you click the little box that says non-arm's length or arm's length, and it will do the calculation in the background for you. You don't have to fuss with that too much. So claim a refund for certain premiums and contributions. So this is a situation where you've rehired, let's say, employees, or you have employees on your payroll, they're eligible employees, and you're claiming the wage subsidy for them. For employees that are actually not working, so you're paying them, but they're off work, you can claim back their EI and CPP and their QPP and their Quebec Parental Insurance Plan premiums. And when you go on to do the calc, so you'll see the information's on our website again now. And when you go to do your application, where you have to fill in the various blanks, one of the blanks will be, do you need to claim back some of this these premiums for these employees that you're paying that are not working? And then there's a couple of deductions that you have to make before you can finalize your wage subsidy claim. So the amount that you're eligible to claim under the 10% temporary wage subsidy for employers. So if you qualified for the 10% wage subsidy that was announced by the government earlier, you have to net it out. And again, it's all built into the form. It'll be fairly seamless for you, but it's not 85%. So you can't get the 10% plus the 75%. There's a netting out that happens there. And maybe Randy can walk you through the mechanics later, or again, it is part of the Q's and A's. And then any amount that you're eligible, that your eligible employees have received under ESDC's worksharing benefit program, again, that would have to be netted out of the calculation. Yeah, so that's the infographics.
Great, thanks very much, Harry. Are you guys ready for questions? We got lots of them.
We're ready as we'll ever be, I guess.
Here we go. Okay, so Rebecca is asking if for biweekly payroll, are we allowed to do an average over the number of days? I think she's asking this because she goes on to say that the first payroll to calculate the biweekly gross pay is for 1 week, and the last payroll before the cutoff for subsidy is also for 1 week. So I think she's finding that her gross pay is split, and so she's wondering how that she would manage that kind of a thing.
It's Randy here. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
So that's a relatively common question. So the way the calculator works, of course, a qualifying period is the 4-week period. And the way the calculator works at present is it provides for a weekly and a biweekly. biweekly pay period. So we understand that there might be pay periods that don't necessarily align with those dates. So an employer will have to prorate the pay such that it aligns within those dates. And that might even be the case where they could end up having a bi-monthly, and that option doesn't occur. So there is a little bit of math and work that the employer has to do to align, but it should work.
Okay, but taking sort of the average over that 2-week period and just splitting it in half, is that something that's coming up a lot in some of the questions I'm seeing here? Can they do something like that?
No, I think they need to align the actual pay within the dates. It doesn't provide for an averaging.
Okay.
The legislation doesn't provide for that.
Okay, that's an important clarification. I'm glad that we asked that. Eunice is asking, some employees were temporarily laid off on March 15th and got paid 4 weeks vacation from their vacation pay bank on March 22nd. Can we allocate the vacation paid over 4 weeks and claim the subsidy?
That's a pretty good question. Actually haven't considered it in that respect. Even though the employer might have paid the 4 weeks vacation for that 4-week period, the employee might have been off. I mean, the employer should be able to claim the wage subsidy for that amount. I'm not sure if when the employee is going to come back to work, but maybe it's something we need to consider in a little bit more detail. It's okay. Not something that I've considered at this point.
Okay, so we can add that to your list of things to look at, and
thank you.
Maybe FA. Thank you, Eunice. Paul is asking, does the wage subsidy apply to salary employees only? Does it include commissioned sales staff who get a T4A?
Hi. If the employee is dealing, actually it doesn't even really matter. So if they're getting commission, if they're a commissioned employee, it does work. It doesn't have to be a salary. So the fact that an employee in and of itself is on commissions really shouldn't matter.
Okay, very good. So Felix, it's a little bit of the same question we've had before. I'm going to go through it because I think it's a 2-part question. Felix is asking, my question is, we pay employees on a semi-monthly basis. How do I calculate the subsidy if information I have for the period of 1st to the 15th and 16th to 31st of every month? So I think that's similar to what we asked earlier. Also, though, we had a 30% wage reduction that was implemented across the board. That is for both employees making more than $1,129.33 per week and not. As a result, some employees right now make less than $1,129.33. So how do I go about calculating their subsidy?
So at the first part of the question, I think I responded to it.
Yeah.
I'll focus on the second part. The calculator will take you through the whole calculation, including what the employee's baseline remuneration was, which is an important part of the calculation. So the fact that the employee had a reduction in pay, it matters for the purposes of the calculation, but you really need to go through the whole calculation, including the baseline remuneration, because what happens, I'm just trying to open my screen here where I have the calculator. Just give me 1 second to get to the calculation. So what happens in the formula is there's a lesser of. So if you look at the calculator, there's a section that talks about the math. So the formula is A minus B minus C plus D. So A, of course, is being the greater of two variables, X and Y. And of course, X is the least of, as only tax geeks could write legislation this way, is the least of three amounts. 75% of the weekly remuneration, which is the actual pay, $847, or zero if it's a non-arm's length employee. So then you compare that to Y, which is the least of eligible remuneration for the week, actual pay, and 75% of the baseline remuneration for the week, and $847. And it's actually the greater of those two amounts. So the fact that there was a reduction in pay could be important, but remembering that it's the greater of those two amounts.
Great. I know it's a bit complicated, but hopefully folks will understand as we continue to go through this.
I think if they go on the website and actually walk through the calculator, especially the section that talks about the math behind the calculation, even though it's a formula, it should be relatively easy to understand.
Okay. So you heard that from CRA, folks. Curtis asking, so I know you guys are doing your best to simplify it as much as possible, and we've been working with you to certainly make that happen, and we'll continue to work with you to make sure that we're getting as much clarity out to small business owners as they go through this process. Curtis is, sorry, somebody wanted to cut in there? No. Okay, Curtis is asking, he said that he didn't take a pay for the week from March 16th to 21st because he wasn't sure if he had to apply for CERB or wait for the 75% wage subsidy. So he did already send in and paid employee remittances for the month of March, and he's asking if he can I backdate a pay for that week in order to get the 75% wage subsidy, or do I cancel that week when applying? So he's talking about his own pay, I believe, versus his employee's pay.
So I'm presuming Curtis is dealing, he's a non-arm's length employee.
I'm presuming he's the owner who draws the salary from the business and did not pay himself during that first week in March this applies, this wage subsidy applies. But did pay for his employees. So yes, he didn't remit that week for himself and wants to know if he can now go back and do that retroactively.
So the CEWS does contemplate retroactive rehiring of employees. That's one of the purposes of it. So it would be important in a situation where someone is dealing at non-arm's length with a corporation, if they're going back on the payroll, that they have a baseline remuneration. If you had a situation where you had a non-arm's length employee who didn't have a baseline remuneration and they decided to pay that non-arm's length employee during the COVID period, then that would be problematic.
Right. So as long as it's arm's length, or if it's non-arm's length, that they were paid a salary prior to March 15th, it should be okay.
Obviously, I can't say exactly what the subsidy would be, but there's a formula to calculate that, but it wouldn't be an automatic exclusion.
Okay, very good. Sarah is asking, if an employer is collecting CERB, if an employee is collecting CERB but are making less than $1,000 per month, so are still eligible, are we, the employer, eligible for the subsidy on that income we are paying out to that employee?
Yes.
Great answer. Quick and easy on that one. Peter is asking, am I able to pay an employee even though they are working reduced or no hours and still claim the 75%?
So you are able to claim the CEWS for employees who are on reduced pay.
Okay, very good.
And then, sorry, it's Harry here, and then just Randy, they're allowed to claim if their employee doesn't work at all, whether they're on reduced pay or not. I think the question talked about if the employee isn't working, then there's also the QPP and the CPP and EI that the employer can claim back on the wages that they've paid that individual. Correct?
That's correct. So there is an add back in addition, so that forms part of the CEWS. Not only the wages, but also the add back for the eligible portion of certain employer portions of deductions.
So just a question on that. Do employers have to apply for that separately, or is that part of the application for the wage subsidy?
So the add back for the employer portion of CPP&EI, let's just keep it simple. The add back is a part of the CEWS calculation, and it's included in the calculator.
Very good. Great, thank you. Stephen is asking, I laid off an employee March 26th and haven't brought him back as of yet. Can I use the 75% wage subsidy for those first 11 days? So from, I guess, March 15th to the 26th. Can he use the 75% wage subsidy for those days?
Yes.
There you go, Stephen. Jennifer is asking for employees paid hourly who have worked less hours post-COVID-19 due to less work, not due to a reduction in hours to save costs. How do we manage their hours for wage compensation? Can we use the baseline from previous months?
I think it's up to each employer to determine how they would manage that. When an employee is on reduced hours or reduced pay post March 15th or March 15th onwards, I mean, the remuneration that's paid will qualify, but as to how an employer manages it, it's probably not something that I can really comment on. Okay,
fair enough. We know that some of these may get quite detailed, and that can maybe put the CRA in a bit of an awkward position, but I respect that you're trying your best to answer the questions as best that you can. Mike wants to know, he said he could not find any info on if a new hire counts as an eligible employee. Can you repeat?
Sorry, is there more
Go
to
ahead.
the question? Yeah, so
nope.
a new hire will count as an eligible employee. However, I would say that if it's a new hire that deals at it doesn't deal at arm's length with the corporation, then there wouldn't be a wage subsidy for that employee. So if you're a wholly owned corporation and you decide to hire on family members who are related that didn't work prior to the crisis, that would be problematic.
Right. Okay. Rob is asking, how can we validate we have the appropriate access in place through Represent a Client or My Business account to ensure we can make the applications next week without issue? Is there anything they can do to check on it?
Karen, maybe I'll leave that one to you.
Yeah, anyone can go on to MyBA right now, and with the access there, they'll be able to view. And I would recommend they view and make sure that on their payroll account or their RP account, that they see that they have direct deposit information, or if they prefer to wait longer and have a check come by mail, that the correct address is associated with their RP account, so that we will make sure that the money comes out to the right location.
Very good. Thank you, Karen. Lori is asking, I have a business with 5 locations. One is closed. One just opened in February 2020. Do we apply per location or per company? And what happens if my new location overtakes and changes our overall company sales % increase to below the 30% mark? Any thoughts?
It's Randy here. So the way the calculation of qualifying revenue works, it's on an entity basis. So if there's one entity with a number of locations, it's based on the entity. And if you're in a position that one of your locations is quite successful and it actually has an increase in revenue such that the whole company doesn't fall below the revenue reduction necessary, then you likely wouldn't be eligible for the wage subsidy.
Okay. She's also asking if there's any help for businesses or business owners who just opened locations. Like she said, she had one in February 2020. So can she still compare it to just the February if that time it's been open, or how would that work? Or is she out of luck?
So there's two methods you can calculate your revenue. One of them is the general year-over-year approach, where you compare revenue for the current period to that previous period. For new businesses that have just opened, they would have to determine their revenue for January and February and compare that to the revenue for the eligible period and determine what the result would be. I know that can be an issue for startups, and given the fact that it's likely they have much lower revenue during the startup period. But unfortunately, that is the result under the legislation that we have. Yeah.
Maybe not the information you wanted to hear, but we'll see what we can do from a CFIB's perspective to make sure that we're helping out businesses like yours in other ways. Hannah says that she seems to have found what she thinks is an error in the formula. She was working on the provided calculator last evening and has quite a bit of detail of what it is that she found out. I'm not sure if I can share that with you. I can share that with you over the phone, but it may be a bit technical. But I'm wondering, just building on Hannah's question, if you are aware of if there are any errors in the calculator right now that maybe businesses should be aware of, or if you're still working on anything, because she seems to feel that there is an error in the results page, which gives you a result that is double the amounts entered in the weekly and biweekly sheets. As part of what she's talking about here.
So I anticipated that question. We've had that question a few times over the last few days. I think we're looking at enhancements to the calculator and make it easier to understand, because that is a common occurrence. But what is happening is that results are being entered in two different places for the same employee, and it's resulting in a duplication. So the instructions may be able to make that a little clearer, so we don't get that common occurrence.
Okay, very good. So
it's Harry here. Just to add to that quickly. So I'm looking at the calculator now, and at the top there's two rows where you can enter stuff, and that's labeled optional batch calculations. And then below there's calculations for all other employees. So I think where the double count is coming in is people are entering it in the batch calculations, and then they're also putting the employees in one at a time, and then that will double up the numbers on the summary sheet.
Okay, very good. Hopefully that answers your question, Hannah. Deborah is saying she just applied for the code for the CRA, I guess my business account. She wants to know though, is there a deadline date to apply for the first month?
Karen?
Not sure what you mean by a deadline date, but if you've applied for MyBA and you're waiting for the access code, it's coming through in the mail, and it just depends how long the mail would take. Or if you're looking for signing on for MyBA for the first time and want the access code more quickly than waiting for the mail, you can call the business inquiries lines and go through authentication, and they will be able to give you the access code.
And I would also add there that even though an employer might be delayed in making their application, they do have up until October 2020 to make the application.
Great, thank you. So you have some time there, Patricia. Eugene is saying that he had to lay off. I had staff on layoff since December 2019 and recalled them in mid-March. Will they qualify for the wage subsidy? Also, I hired new employees in early April. Will they qualify? Well, we've answered that question. So maybe the first part of the question. So it's staff layoffs since December 19, but were recalled in mid-March, and will they qualify then for the wage subsidy?
So I don't have the exact dates there. So the important part is that rehires do qualify as long as the employees deal at arm's length with the employer if they don't have that baseline remuneration period. So it's just another variation on the same question. You go through the calculation and you will discover that rehires do qualify. But if they deal at non-arm's length with the corporation, then you really need to take a close look to make sure they have that baseline remuneration that's necessary.
Right. Yeah, that's the key on that one. And Trevor's asking, and it's probably a good segue into this, and maybe it's just a quick overview. What is arm's length versus non-arm's length? I think if you could provide just a quick difference between those two, that would help Trevor.
For sure. So when you actually go through the calculator, there's a good definition of arm's length and non-arm's length there. So in the context for most small businesses, obviously the owner who's incorporated doesn't deal at arm's length with his corporation, and then any of his employees who are closely related wouldn't deal at arm's length with the corporation. So that's going to be the most common occurrence.
Okay. I hope that clarified things for you, Trevor. Tara is asking, if we had employees employed on March 15th, but then laid off on the 24th, they won't be eligible because that's less than 14 days, question mark, that's her question. And what if the employee claimed vacation for the following weeks? Would that count? Even if the formal work ended on March 24th. So, somebody able to take that question?
I'm sorry, it's Randy here. My microphone was off. Please excuse me. So
okay.
the key here is that for an employee during a qualifying period to be considered an eligible employee, they can't have been without remuneration for more than 14 days. So if they're being paid because they're on vacation and they're within that threshold, then it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, very good. And it's, I guess, a somewhat similar question. Megan is asking, do the employees have to have worked full-time every day for the 14-day period? What about part-time or casual employees?
It shouldn't matter. The key is being without remuneration for that period.
Okay. Okay. Another question from Paul. If you are eligible for period 1, you automatically qualify for period 2. But if you can establish that you are eligible in period 2, would you automatically qualify for period 3?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Sorry, there's so many questions here. So my business is only open 12 hours a week right now. This is from Brady, as we are not allowed to fully operate. I have 3 staff members, each working 4 hours per week and are collecting CERB. Can I apply for the wage subsidy for the few hours per week I'm paying my staff, or do I need to bring them back full time?
The amount of remuneration that the employer would pay them, provided all the other conditions are met, would qualify.
Okay, great. So Derek is asking, so if we laid off staff on March 15th and hired everyone back on April 6th because of the promise of this wage subsidy, are we able to claim the weeks of the 6th to the 11th? Or now are we stuck not able to claim this week's pay? We paid them already and had them cancel their EI benefits for that week.
So the remuneration that is paid to qualify, it must be paid in respect of a period of employment that is March 15th or afterwards.
Right. Okay. Duarte is asking, if you're using represent a client, are you attesting for the client or personally attesting the information provided? And he's suggesting the latter is a concern as you are using information provided by a client.
I'll leave that to Karen to answer.
If you're using represent a client, yeah, the representatives will be asked to have on file the attestation from the business owner, and they will do a separate attestation but it is not the same as the attestation that the business owner would do. So there is a realization that the representative, of course, cannot attest to something for the business owner.
Right, exactly. Okay, thank you. I hope that clears things up, Duarte. Andrew wants to know, are you forced to use the 10% wage subsidy? The spreadsheet seems to show that you are forced to use it.
It's Randy here. That's a great question. The way the legislation works is with the interaction of the temporary wage subsidy and the CEWS, is that for the 10% wage subsidy, if you're eligible, you're deemed to have remitted that amount to the agency, so that goes into your payroll account and factors into the actual cash that you must remit in respect of withholdings. And for the CEWS, it's an automatic deduction for the amount you would have been eligible for under the temporary wage subsidy. So what that actually means is that you should be calculating the temporary wage subsidy first, because it's an automatic deduction for purposes of the CEWS.
Okay. Okay. Grace wants to know, do we claim back the EI and CPP only for employees not working but being paid, or do we include all eligible employees paid in the eligible period?
So the amount of withholdings, employer portion of withholdings that can be added to the CEWS is only for those employees who are paid and not working. So what we generally refer to as furloughed employees.
Okay. And I guess I have a follow-up question on that. How does CRA know which are furloughed and which are actually working if they have both? Is there some way that, is there testing to that, or how does that?
How do we know? We probably wouldn't, but the employer would, and the employer actually has to attest to the fact that the employees for which they're claiming the CEWS, including the employer portion of CPP and EI, where it's relevant for a furloughed employee, they have to attest that that is the correct amount.
Very good. So it is an attestation. Stephen is asking, my common law wife is employed by my company. I wasn't sure if the section on arm's length applied to her. We've both been salaried employees for the past 8 years. She is working now. Am I able to use a 75% subsidy for both of us?
So the first point I would make is that if you're in a common law relationship, then obviously you're dealing at non-arm's length. But in and of itself, a non-arm's length employee who has a baseline remuneration can qualify for the CEWS.
Great, great. Daniel says thanks for the webinar. So I'm glad that you like it, Daniel. How do you enter the benefits employees get from work sharing?
I'm not quite sure I fully understand that. The benefit they get from work sharing. So is he talking about the deduction for the ESDC funding for work sharing program? If he is, there's a portion on the calculator, I believe, where that amount is deducted. Okay.
Okay. Very good. So Frank is asking, how do I calculate source deductions that need to be remitted? Is it only on my 25%?
I confess to not really fully understanding the question.
Oh, okay. I guess what he's asking about that since he's only responsible for 25% of salary, is he responsible only for 25% of the source deductions, or still responsible for all source deductions?
Well, the employer is actually getting the wage subsidy is funding that goes to the employer, not to the employee. So it's the employer's responsibility to pay the employer the salary for which they're claiming the wage subsidy, and the employer would be responsible for the withholdings on the entire portion of the salary that they pay.
Right. So it's 100% that you have to pay. Okay.
Yes. Thank you for that clarification.
no problem. Just wanted to make sure that we're giving Frank the right information. So many of these are similar to what we've asked before. A lot of folks asking about non-arm's length and whether they can, but I think we've answered that quite a bit. As long as they were paid a salary prior to March 15th, if there's a spouse or someone else who's a non-arm's length in the company, they can be included as part of the 75% waived subsidy. So yeah, and then again, there's also Karina is asking, we've also gone through this before, if we never claim the 10% wage subsidy, can we just go ahead and claim the full 75% subsidy if we meet the criteria, or do we have to do the 10% first and then apply for the new program? I think you've sort of gone through that already. So maybe just a quick.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that you don't actually apply for the temporary wage subsidy. You're deemed to have remitted the amount. So that factors into your calculation of the actual cash amount you would be remitting to the CRA, whether you do it within the current withholding period or if there's a bit of a catch-up period even at year end for some small businesses.
Okay. Amber's asking a question, and I'm not sure if I understand it, so I'll put it out there and we'll see if maybe between us we can get an answer for Amber. But she said if some employees have pay weeks of $0, is that still okay? She goes on to say, we are seasonal and work depends on weather. Some of them have no pre-crisis earnings and some didn't work some weeks of the period. Is that something that you can respond to, or do you have enough information there?
I'll make a couple of general comments. I think we understand that, seasonal businesses where there is, periods of inactivity, can cause some angst for small businesses. But with this particular thing, the important thing to remember is if there is no pre-COVID pay, I'll call it that, and during the period for which an employer would otherwise be eligible for the CEWS, as long as that employee, even if they don't have a baseline remuneration, doesn't deal at non-arm's length with the corporation, they should be okay. But if it's one of those businesses where there's no baseline remuneration for a non-arm's length employee, that could be problematic.
Great, thank you very much. I know we're coming up close to the end of the hour here, and we do have to stop right at 4 o'clock. I'm going to ask just a few more questions, but I do have to say that there are really many questions here, and I'm trying to find ones that are a bit different than some of the ones you've already asked. I do have one here from Robbie. Can a person who normally only receives residential rental income but isn't receiving the rent because of COVID-19 work difficulties with their tenants qualify for this benefit?
So I'm presuming they're talking about the rental revenue. So
correct.
A decrease in rental revenue would, of course, qualify, presuming the employer meets all the other conditions. So it would qualify in terms of calculating whether or not they meet that qualifying revenue reduction. I don't see it as being particularly problematic.
Okay. And then I'm going to slip in a couple more here. Joanne wants to know, does an employer have to pay the payroll before applying for the 75% wage subsidy?
That's a very good question. That we've seen that question a few times, and the way the subsidy works, it's amounts paid. So within that qualifying period, you have to have paid the remuneration in respect of work during that period. So it doesn't really contemplate much of a lag there between the time the employee earned it and the actual time they received it. And of course, it's a short program as well, and you have a 4-week period for which you want to claim, unless you're going to wait until the end and claim all 3 periods at the same time.
Right. Okay. And I'll throw in one more, and then we'll do a bit of a quick roundup. But Ryan wants to know, if you submitted an ROE for an employee before this was announced, then kept them on and kept paying them the whole time, will this affect eligibility?
So I don't see ROE as being an issue. I would presume they've canceled it and the employee is not claiming unemployment insurance because they're actually back on the payroll, so I don't see it as being problematic.
Okay, so it's important that the ROE gets canceled and that the employee never collected EI. So other than that, then that would be no problem there. Okay, like I said, there are many, many, many more questions here that unfortunately we're not going to be able to get to. What I would encourage folks to do, if you didn't hear an answer to your question, you can certainly, I don't know if there's, they can contact CRA and ask directly. You can certainly contact CFIB as well at 1-888-234-2232. We can continue to try to answer some of those questions for you. We're also learning through this webinar ourselves. So I just encourage you, and I'm sorry if we couldn't get to your questions, but I know there's a lot more. We are hoping to do another, and I hope I'm not saying anything I shouldn't be saying, but we're hoping to do another webinar next week with CRA. I think we're looking at Wednesday, so hopefully that can happen and we can get some more folks on as well, because I know there was a lot of folks that wanted to be on this one. And maybe answer some more questions then. But also, please feel free to call CFIB directly or CRA directly to try to get other answers to your questions if we did not get to it. What I want to do now is I do want to allow Faisal, who didn't have a chance at the beginning of the call, to say a few words from the Minister's office. So maybe I'll turn it over to you, Faisal, before we close this up.
Thanks, Karine. It's Faisal here. For the many of you who I haven't had the chance to meet yet, I'm the Director of Policy for the Minister of National Revenue, and little did I know when I accepted this job, we'd be thrown in the midst of COVID in helping deliver some of the biggest programs the Government of Canada has ever delivered. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join this call and highlight some of the issues and some of the questions you guys have where we can help add clarity. These types of stakeholder engagements are really important to the Minister, and she asks the agency and us to participate fully, and she likes to get debriefed to know what. So she's fully, fully informed as to what's going on here. And I wanted to thank the CFIB for allowing us to engage in this stakeholder consultation and for helping to host it. And I'd also just like to take a chance to thank all of you for contributing, and also everyone at the agency who's worked so hard to put these programs together in record timing. So
I think we lost Faisal. He was coming in and out there. Well, thank you for those kind words, Faisal. And I do want to thank everybody at CRA who joined this call. Randy, Harry, Karen. I know there were some others also listening in and helping out, but it's been very helpful to have this opportunity to get the questions answered directly from the folks at CRA overseeing these programs. And hopefully we can continue to provide you with the feedback that you need. And we thank you once again. We also thank everybody who joined us this afternoon, and we will continue to make sure we can find ways to answer your questions. So please, again, call us, CFIB, or call CRA directly. CFIB's number, 1-888-234-2232, should you have any further questions. Thank you again, everybody. And with that, I will close this webinar.